Welcome to Executive Insights for Life Sciences Innovators, and thanks for joining us. On this podcast, we'll explore leadership, innovation, and growth in the life sciences sector. I'm Don Alexander, founder of GeneCoda, a boutique executive search firm dedicated to connecting visionary leaders with life sciences companies shaping the future of therapeutics and scientific tools. On each episode, we'll dive into candid conversations with industry pioneers, uncovering strategies, insights, and real world experiences that drive success in our industry. If you're interested in presenting as a guest of a future episode, please scan the barcode image at the top of my video frame and follow the instructions. Now I'm pleased to be joined by Charles Legg, the COO of CureLab Oncology. Welcome, Charles.
Thank you very much, Don.
For 30 years, Charles has enjoyed a successful bio and health tech career working on a variety of cutting-edge therapeutics and technologies. Originally a biochemistry and molecular biology bench scientist, he moved into program management, leading cross-functional teams for the development of regulated diagnostics and then therapeutics for rare genetic disease. Charles then moved into gene therapies and played a role in two IPOs, Bluebird and Solid Biosciences, and he later joined an early AI company launching one of the first smart tech search engines for hospital EMRs. Today, he's Chief Operating Officer of CureLab Oncology and holds multiple fractional and board roles with a variety of small but rapidly progressing companies, ranging from ultra-sensitive cardiovascular intelligence at Quan Bio to a platform to revolutionize senior care and research into longevity and age-related diseases, a remote home check. So, Charles, let's again, thanks for being here. Let's talk a little bit about your career journey and your leadership philosophy. What initially drew you into the life sciences industry and ultimately now into oncology?
Yeah, for me it was pretty easy. I had a great, I don't know, family, great set of grandparents who had a cottage by the ocean, and I was always, the kid rolling over rocks, finding salamanders and catching crabs and all kinds of stuff. And as I got, older, it's kind of like the perfect combination of progression of the industry and science. In college, they had the first transgenic animal with Dolly and the Human Genome Project. I mean, just kind of a really fascinating time. So by the time I graduated, there was a whole biotech industry, and I was just super excited to get going. I thought it was amazing stuff.
Absolutely. Boy, that brings back some memories right there. Were there, I guess, Charles, key inflection points that shaped your transition into the leadership roles that you hold today? And if so, feel
Sure.
free to explore those.
Yeah, no, I mean, for sure, when I was working at Associates of Cape Cod, which is a diagnostics company, they passed the 21 CFR Part 11, which is the whole electronic signatures and audit trails and everything necessary for diagnostic, units and software. And so the company I was with, we had to kind of hit the gas pedal and catch up a little bit on that, and I ended up leading that project. And then after that, launching it, and so that was my opportunity to really get out and see you know, a whole bunch of our different customers of different sizes and shapes. I traveled internationally, trained all of our international sales force. And now up until then, I'd been a bench scientist, so that was really a big transition in terms of, getting me into the whole sales side and commercialization side of an organization. Later, when I was at Shire, they reorganized the company a little bit and created franchise teams within the company, kind of miniature companies, and so I was a part of that. And again, it was fascinating stuff, and getting to be really on the front lines of it, getting out to patients all over the world was an amazing experience. And then getting into gene therapy. I mean, that's kind of what we were all dreaming of. If you grew up as a fan of the X-Men or comic book characters like I was, I mean, now it's real. It's here. Uh, and so, I mean, yeah, I just feel very fortunate to have found some of these roles and experience these big changes in the industry, and we continue to do so. You know, we have AI and all kinds of interesting things. So I'm still out there, still loving it, and yeah, we'll see what comes next.
That's great, Charles. Again, a second trip down memory lane. How has your leadership experience, I guess, evolved as you've navigated scientific complexity and company building over the years?
Yeah, I would say earlier in my career, I was a workhorse. I was, you work hard, you get success, you keep going. Uh, and honestly, as I started to progress in my career, some of the feedback I got from some great mentors was, Charles, you have no problem with your work ethic, but you need to work smarter and you need to start building like your brand. And I kind of hate that phrase, but to a degree, I mean, you need to let people know who you are and what you're thinking. And, when you have the ability to step up and lead. And so, I don't do it from a place of arrogance or somehow that, I believe I can do it by myself. You know, the one thing that this industry is absolutely amazing at is teaching you humility. It is very difficult to develop a drug start to finish. And so, my philosophy has probably been adjusting where I value people a lot more. It's not just an employee. I mean, everybody kind of plays a really important role. And that goes for competition as well. Even as a single company, I'm always looking for other companies to partner with, other great minds, other universities or academic centers. It's just too hard to try to do it by yourself. And we've seen companies raise hundreds of millions of dollars only to fall on their face. And so we can't always prevent that, but we can do our best to try to make the best use of what we have, what everybody else is doing, and really try to do something meaningful for patients out there.
That's great. Yeah. It takes a village, and
It does.
that's understood. So, and you touched on scientific uncertainty. So, Charles, what have you, I guess, learned about building teams in environments where both the science and the timelines they carry significant uncertainty?
Yeah, I mean, this is actually a little bit of situational awareness, team awareness. We have things like the Myers-Briggs test. What is the purpose? Like, why is it valuable to take a Myers-Briggs test? It's to share it so that other people understand how you think, how you approach problems, how you interact with other people. And it's kind of in that same vein of thinking where you're looking for folks who are approaching problems from a different perspective, from a different set of expertise. Some of us are very Gantt chart, oriented, and it's like, okay, I'm going to apply 3 people, and they're going to work for 4 weeks, and we're going to get to a certain place. And that's a lot easier to do for technical writing, for shipping goods, things of this nature. In research, you really don't know. You can apply more resource. You can, bring on other external resources, but it's hard to move that needle exactly where you want it to go. And so it's more about, I talk to people a lot about opportunity cost. And so it's like, why should I work so hard if I don't know that the other piece is going to match up? And it's like, but if you don't, then we won't be ready. And so if we miss it, we miss it. But it's not going to be because, some other piece was late. All you can do is optimize for each path. You deal with reality. But I can't even begin to tell you the number of instances in my career where, something happens, another company, they fail the trial, and now all of a sudden you're center stage. A lot of times it's things less, glamorous than that, but it's really important to always be looking at how do I create the opportunity to get ahead faster. And if you need any motivation, everything we work on is with patient health. The people out there dying every single day, and I don't want to have to look anybody in the eye and say, "Oh, I'm sorry, we just decided to slow down for a few months." Like, no.
Absolutely. The patient is a motivating force. No question about it. Let's dive into CureLab a little bit. At a high level, how is CureLab's approach seeking to advance beyond earlier generations of immuno-oncology IO pipelines and therapies.
Yeah, so CureLab took a little bit of a different path in its development. We went overseas to do some of the early trials. It was a cheaper, more cost-effective way to do it. Uh, and so, through that, we've gotten some, I'm not going to call it amazing. Anytime people are dying, it's hard to use superlatives, but we got some high quality data out of it, and we had statistically significant uh, impact on progression-free survival, which is a key endpoint. So 7.2 months versus 2.7 just on chemo, the standard of care. And so, we're looking now to raise the capital and build the team and get everybody lined up for the next push there. We got some interesting data in humans on triple negative breast cancer as well. So we're very hopeful, and we're working with a great PI down at MD Anderson to, progress that program back here in the States. And we have a really interesting early, pipeline that I won't waste too much time on right now, but I think that's going to yield some interesting stuff.
That's great. It sounds like the pipeline already has a top line. How is, I guess, the evolving understanding of the tumor microenvironment influencing therapeutic development there at CureLab?
Yeah, I mean, I think one of the early observations that we had was that uh, in an early trial, patients went off of their chemotherapy, went on to our therapy. We saw some good indicators that it was working. It was not statistically powered. But afterwards, they went back on the chemo, and the reason that they were participating was that they really weren't responding to the chemo previously. So it was pure exploratory time. But afterwards, even though they weren't even receiving our drug anymore, they were responding better to chemo again. And that was one of our first hints that we had changed something more than just attacking cancer. And so indeed, if you look at the tumor microenvironment, by changing it, things like shifting it from collagen 1 to collagen 3, other biomarkers that indicate that the actual changes occurring, you have better, infiltration of TILs and other natural cancer fighting, immune responses. And that allows chemo to work better. It allows, you know, most likely other therapies to work better. And so I think part of what we're going to be learning, in this world of immunotherapy, is that everything works better in combination. I mean, even Keytruda is used with chemo. But I think, with some of the new stuff that's coming out, one of the great things about what we're doing is we have a very clean safety profile, so it lends itself well to partnering other therapies with it. But I think that's going to be one of the big things is as we understand that microenvironment better, and we can, really create some combination therapies to, leverage the attack. I foresee outcomes getting better, and I don't want to call it exciting, but I think there will be a lot of interesting opportunities, and I'm always out there looking, at what other companies are developing and how we might work with them.
That's great. Partnerships. Where do you see, I guess, the greatest unmet need in oncology today?
That's a hard one. Cancer is still a big killer out there on a number of fronts. We've made some amazing progress across the industry with checkpoint inhibitors and immunotherapies and other things. Uh, so, I look at platinum resistant ovarian cancer. Obviously, that's what we're working on. There's actually not very many approved drugs for that indication. We tend to think that, oh, we have all these new things for cancer, but in specific indications, it's actually still quite sparse. And so that's one thing. I think as we look globally, obviously cost continues to be an issue. So, first we're trying to solve the unsolvable, but then we have to do it for a greater number of people. And so I think, that's another big one out there. Uh, right now, I think everybody is sensitive to these issues. And so you have great scientists coming up with, interesting potential solutions every day. You've got a lot of people putting in a lot of money to try to drive all this forward. An interesting, acknowledgement from one of the VCs I spoke to is, in the world of cancer, it's not about what's the market size and then what share are you going to steal, or somehow offset another product, or it's like, no, the people are generally just desperate for more options. The market will grow to accommodate whatever you can come up with, because it is that tough. You know, I, there's some types of cancers where they're doing better, some are worse, but overall, there's still a long way to go.
Yes, complex ecosystem for sure. Let's talk a little bit about scaling funding and business strategy then. What have been the most significant challenges in advancing CureLab's platform toward clinical development, would you say?
Um, the most significant challenges, I guess I would say, as a small company, uh, we are a little bit limited in what we can do. What do I mean by that? I mean, you would like to study everything under the sun, every biomarker, every imaging test, every thing that you could possibly load into a clinical trial. Uh, that would not only blow up the costs on us beyond what we can handle, but you simply can't handle it logistically. I can't take several liters of blood or tissues or other things out of a patient to run all this. And yet, the more that you understand that, the better your chances get at coming up with some sort of solution. And so again, you come back to, if we're working on platinum-resistant ovarian cancer, and so are two or three other companies, it would be nice to coordinate a little bit on that and say, how can we optimize, sample utilization, or how can we optimize, control arms and different things like that. So you make you know, the best use of each patient, which, if you're going to participate in a clinical trial like this and you're dying, that's kind of what they want, right? I mean, they're doing it for the next generation or the next set of patients, and so you'd like to make sure that their sacrifice is being well respected and that you're doing the best you can with it.
Absolutely. Yeah, talking about the funding just in a broad sense, you can't do it all. So how do you, I guess, think about capital efficiency, as it were, and prioritization in today's biotech funding environment?
Yeah, I mean, I think people have certainly been running clinical trials for a long time. And we've been doing manufacturing of plasmids for a while now under GMP conditions. So people are coming up with methods and ways of doing it, faster, cheaper, better controlled, uh, you know, leveraging data. Even today, AI is available for some document writing and checking of data, and so it's incumbent upon us to take all the best kind of leading technologies, make sure the validation and the quality is there, but to leverage everything we can, to squeeze out every dime, to squeeze out every sample, and make sure that we are doing the best that we can. Uh, I think part of it is, it's very hard to get to proof of concept and then proof of efficacy, uh, and then you get to a certain point where everybody knows it works, and then all of a sudden, the funding is not the problem anymore. It's logistics and scale up, and so I think we're coming close to that nexus where we've been very cost efficient in development, uh, and pretty quickly that's going to start shifting to where we need to be able to execute and grow quickly, and find honestly the right partners, because we'll never go from being a small company to being able to commercialize this globally. Like, we'll need a bigger partner or partners to make that all happen, and that's a responsibility as much as it's an opportunity. So we're looking at that.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So you've touched on partnerships, fundraising. What, I guess, when you're meeting with investors, what factors have been the most important when communicating, complex science uh, to the fundraisers?
Well, that
Oh,
actually kind of is the trick of it. We're very used to thinking about kind of a seek and destroy, like what's a new surface marker that I can go target and destroy that cancer cell. What we're doing is different. It was almost kind of a, an amazing, it wasn't random, but it wasn't expected necessarily either. So, it was noted in a couple of papers that this messaging protein called P62 was elevated in some cancer types. The founder of the company, as a scientist, said, you know what, I'm just going to take the sequence for that, plug it into a plasmid, and inject it and see what happens. And a lot of us, including myself, when I had lunch with him the first time, was like, I don't understand. Like, you're going to inject it, maybe you get a little bit of protein made or something. The DNA will be there. You might get a mild immune response like every other DNA vaccine, but they really don't do much. Like, I don't get it. It's like, no, 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 no. In this particular case, it acts like an early trigger against cancer. Your body does have the ability to fight cancer, but by the time that it realizes something's going on, it's way too late. You're way too far down the path. So somehow, this, I don't want to say somehow, that we know fair more than that, but it is like an early trigger, and then a lot of it is allowing your own immune response to take place. It involves checkpoint inhibitors, the tumor microenvironment, all these different factors, and like I said, it also allows the chemo to work better. So you know, it, we're kind of like a back door, if you will, of approaching it a different way. And I suspect, that this is probably not the only example. And so, as we again combine these therapies and leverage, all the positive effects of each one, uh, you know, I'm hopeful a lot of amazing things will come out of that.
absolutely. Several combinations there. Let's talk a little bit about the future. What milestones will be most important for CureLab over the next several years?
Yeah, I mean, number one, of course, is getting the next trial set up and going. So, dosing the first patient in that trial will be, I think, a big milestone that a lot of folks will be following. We're going to be spending a lot more time and effort reaching out to some larger partners, and seeing if they have any interesting input they might want to have in the trial, along with formalizing any partnerships. Like I said, we don't intend to commercialize this ourselves, and so you'd certainly like to get whatever that partner is going to be in a little bit earlier, so they can influence what's going on and take advantage of whatever knowledge base they have internally. Um, and I would say we're also very hopeful for the triple negative breast cancer program. So in a similar fashion, we're working to put all that together and get that running. So I would simply just, my big focus is on trying to get those two things, plugging away. We have an earlier stage pipeline, some interesting stuff going on there. I'm not really going to talk too much about it, but again, we are partnering with different groups, and that's mostly at the academic level right now, but that will change. And, it'll be a big inflection, the first time that we do a real deal and raise significantly more capital. A lot more things will open up, but right now it's stay on mission, stay on task, do everything right. Don't mess it up, and stay humble, stay aggressive.
Absolutely, yeah. You touched on a lot of really interesting points there. How do you see, I guess, immunotherapy evolving if you look 5, 10 years out over the next decade? Any thoughts about how things might develop?
Yeah, well, it's funny. I am an advisor for yet another company. Recently came out called Covantage, and they have come up with a very interesting platform where they use AI along with some clever aspects of biology, to come up with combinations of therapies that either been studied before or are actually already commercialized, but to come up with combinations of those for new indications. And of course, there's no reason you can't apply that same type of science to new discovery. And so I think platforms like that, where you're combining the power of AI with some very practical knowledge base, on any variety of disease indications, especially cancer, but many others. I think we'll see amazing things. I mean, they can already, you know, uh, you create a library of antibodies against something, you can get AI to predict the whole rest of that and which one would be the best. And so if you consider that kind of power, where it can look at combinations, it can look at single antibodies and other mechanisms, and optimize them, almost real time. It should speed up discovery. It should speed up, the way that we, develop drugs. And if we certainly if we can repurpose stuff that's already out there, then that's even faster. You've already figured out manufacturing and some of the other tricky things. So I just have nothing but hope for the future. But it's still, you got to figure out, how do I validate AI and other things.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Oh, that's fantastic. And we have a lot of listeners on this podcast that are founders and executives that have a tendency towards earlier stage, if you will, in their development curve. And I was curious about what thoughts you might like to share with other leaders that are building life sciences organizations today from all the experiences that you've had.
I think, I mean, there's some stuff that will probably sound a little bit obvious, but I'll say it anyway. The world is catching up. Um, there are programs everywhere of people trying to solve these big problems. Uh, you know, Japan has AMED, which is the equivalent of our NIH, and they have a program where if you get funding from a VC registered with AMED, uh, it could be a Japanese VC, many of them are. There's some US ones that are there. I'm sure more will join. But you can get matching 2-to-1 funds right now, and it's non-dilutive, and they don't demand a board seat. They're just trying to jumpstart biotech development in Japan again. In Australia, there's tax credits that bring something like 42.5% of all the dollars you spend in R&D all the way up to commercialization. So preclinical studies, clinical trials, manufacturing. If you do it right, if you file these things correctly, that's a tremendous bonus in terms of capital spent. There's, all kinds of opportunities, grants. We used to kind of just think of it as applying to the NIH or something, but now you have the Gates Foundation and the Chan Zuckerberg and so many other, I think, groups and funds that it's almost more, the challenge is finding out about all of them. And so if you're a small company, go after the grants, talk to people, look internationally, even if you intend to keep your company here. There's just great scientists, great stuff happening out there, and I still continue to be overwhelmed. I'm always feeling like I'm not quite keeping up with all the great opportunities. But yeah, there's only so much anyone or any company can do in a day. But yeah, just keep plugging away.
Absolutely, that's great. Yeah, I don't know anybody that can keep up with it all. So, for the listeners that are interested, perhaps in learning more, where should they go to follow CureLab's progress?
Well, we're pretty active in terms of, we release anything interesting that's going on out there. I mean, if it's a trial result, of course, we'll do a press release. Otherwise, we do try to get out and, talk to, the media, gets, short articles written, easy to, digest and absorb what we've accomplished and where we're headed. We are actually hoping to get out and do more of activity like this, more podcasts, and make sure we're out there talking to the industry, to the patients, across rare disease, across cancer, across other stuff. There's actually been quite a bit of complaint that companies don't spend enough time talking to their patients, or just the public. People are actually quite fascinated by all this if you just make it digestible for them. And so hopefully, we'll continue down that path and others will. And I know my friends who are not scientists, love catching up on this kind of stuff.
Absolutely. That's great, Charles. Well, that wraps up this episode of Executive Insights for Life Sciences Innovators. I appreciate you tuning in and hope you found today's conversation valuable. If you enjoyed the discussion, please be sure to leave us a review and share it with your network. Please also mark your calendars for April 17th at 1 o'clock Eastern Time with Michael Heltzen of Exozymes. Thanks for listening, and I'll see you soon.